There's a seat waiting for you in the darkness. Take it. Dim the lights. If ancient books have ever whispered your name, if you've ever suspected that certain pages read you back, then subscribe and step behind the curtain with us tonight. We gather to listen for a particular sound, not thunder, not chant, but a voice that crawls. They call it the Picatrix, though it began as something else entirely, a whisper in Arabic ink, a rumor from ruined temples, a method for catching starlight in a cup. Every scholar of the forbidden knows its name. Every careful librarian keeps it close to the desk. Every occultist, whether they swear it works or swear it wounds, knows this simple truth. Once you let the idea in, it speaks through you. The promise tonight is bedtime-safe, forbidden knowledge. A book like a theater, where the stage is set by constellations, actors masked as metals and herbs, scenes arranged by planetary hours. The claim is audacious, that images, carved or painted at precise moments, fed by scents that please invisible mouths, can bend probability itself. That the cosmos is not mute but musical, and that you, if you listen with sufficient precision, can learn to hum along key and gate, veil and void. But what makes the Picatrix the most powerful occult book ever written? Not the recipes alone, not the careful lists of frankincense and aloes wood, not the instructions for fumigations whose smoke tastes like rain on bronze. Power, in this context, reveals itself as something subtler and more terrifying: transmissibility. The way an idea persists, mutates, survives regimes and religions, survives even the faith of its readers. It is the book as parasite and as seed, the text that harvests attention and returns omens. The manuscript that would become the Picatrix first materialized in the intellectual crucible of medieval Islam, where scholars worked by lamplight to decode the hieroglyphs of heaven. In those scriptoriums, surrounded by the scent of parchment and ink, translators discovered something that made their hands tremble as they wrote. Not just another collection of astrological correspondences or alchemical formulas, but a comprehensive technology for consciousness itself. A manual for becoming the kind of being that could speak directly with the intelligence that moves the stars. Our first stake tonight is honesty about cost. Every grimoire exacts its price. Isolation, obsession, the slow migration of dreams from quiet blue to metallic green. The Picatrix asks for something different and more profound. It asks for your model of causality itself. It will barter you a new one. You will begin to suspect that symbols are not labels, but levers, that your thoughts are not entirely your own, that the stage you sit before is also a mirror, and that this audience, you right now, is already part of the play. The idea acts on you. Listen carefully now. A syllable beneath syllable. In the spaces between words, a ladder of signs appears, a sigil not drawn, but remembered, a mask floating on the dark water of the mind. The Picatrix is not merely a book. It is a method for assembling a cosmology that can run on your attention the way old engines ran on oil. It is the crawling voice that crosses centuries by sitting in your ear for one transformative night. What distinguished this work from its predecessors was its systematic integration of theory and practice. Earlier, magical texts had provided either abstract philosophy or specific techniques, but rarely both in coherent relationship. The Picatrix presented a complete worldview where every ritual instruction emerged logically from clearly articulated metaphysical principles, while every philosophical concept found expression through concrete practical applications. This integration created a feedback loop where theoretical understanding deepened practical effectiveness, while practical experience validated and refined theoretical comprehension. Yet the true horror of the Picatrix lies not in its techniques, but in its implications. The text suggests that ordinary human experience consists largely of unconscious participation in cosmic processes that operate according to their own logic and purposes. What we call individual thoughts, personal desires, and autonomous decisions may represent surface manifestations of vast impersonal forces seeking expression through human consciousness. The book offers a path to conscious participation in these processes, but conscious participation inevitably reveals the extent to which unconscious participation has been occurring all along. We will trace its serpentine path, origins in Abbasid shadow and Andalusian dusk, translation in a wise king's bright court, whispers in the Renaissance, ghosts in modern scholarship. We will define its terrifying mechanics, astral rays, living images, imagination as ontological engine. We will examine its cases, Alfonso's scribes, Ficino's careful restraint, Agrippa's hungry appetite, Bruno's memory theater. We will name the price it extracts, and we will say with the calm tone of plotters exactly why this book earned its reputation as the most powerful. The curtain rises now. The first sign glows faintly like a planet seen through fog. And you are already beneath its influence because this knowledge, once named, calls to those who hear it, and calling, it leaves a mark that will only be explained in the scenes to come. The stage is set, the performance has begun, and you, dear seeker, are no longer merely watching. Before it wore its Latin mask, the crawling voice spoke Arabic, Gayat al-Hakam, the aim of the sage, not a book that opens, but a gate that narrows, compiled in the intellectual crucible of 10th and 11th century Al-Andalus, where Islamic civilization reached its zenith of synthesis and daring. Here, in the shadow of Cordoba's great library and the observatories of Toledo, an anonymous compiler, sometimes attributed to the mathematician Maslama ibn Ahmad al-Mujrid, wove together the most dangerous threads of ancient wisdom into a single, terrifying tapestry. The Gayat al-Hakam did not emerge in isolation. It crystallized from a constellation of earlier works that had been flowing toward this moment like tributaries converging into a dark river. Al-Kind-Shaw's On the Stellar Rays provided the theoretical foundation. The universe operates through emanations, invisible influences that flow from celestial bodies to terrestrial receivers according to discoverable laws. Abu Mashar's comprehensive astrological encyclopedias supplied the mathematical framework. The Haranian Sabians, those astral pagans tolerated under Islamic law, contributed their flame of imagecraft and precise timing. Behind them all hummed the Hermetic corpus with its fundamental axiom, as above, so below. But the compiler did more than collect. He synthesized. The Gayat al-Hakam presents itself as the ultimate marriage of Aristotelian physics, Ptolemaic astronomy, Neoplatonic metaphysics, and practical magic. The result is not superstition, but a comprehensive natural philosophy where magical causation operates according to the same principles that govern the movement of planets and the growth of plants. This is cosmic horror in its purest form, the revelation that the universe itself is a magical operation, vast and indifferent, running according to principles that dwarf human understanding. In the scriptoriums where this synthesis took place, scholars worked surrounded by the scent of burning amber and parchment that rasped like dry riverbed. They understood themselves to be engaged in something far more dangerous than mere academic compilation. The knowledge they were assembling had been scattered deliberately across centuries and cultures, hidden in fragments to prevent any single mind from grasping its complete implications. Yet here, in Al-Andalus, conditions had aligned to make such synthesis inevitable. Open the early chapters, and you encounter method dressed as mythology. The cosmos breathes with emanations, rays that carry qualities downward from celestial spheres. Saturn radiates melancholy and structure. Jupiter emanates expansion and wisdom. Mars pulses with conflict and courage. These are not poetic metaphors, but engineering specifications. The sage learns to become a mirror, catching these rays through precise alignment of time, matter, form, breath, and imagination. The result is what the text calls a surah, an image installed to participate in stellar governance of terrestrial affairs. The Arabic original reveals its danger through structure. 4 books within the book. First, principles, then the faces of images, then the scaffold of elections. Finally, applications where theory becomes terrifyingly practical. Each section builds upon the last, creating not just a manual, but an initiation. The reader who works through the complete text undergoes a fundamental transformation of consciousness, learning to perceive reality as a vast network of correspondences where human will can achieve temporary alignment with cosmic forces. The book's warnings echo with genuine dread. It speaks of fierce spirits who police the gates between worlds, of fasting and isolation required to purify intention, of knowledge as both medicine and poison. The Arabic text repeatedly emphasizes that these are experiments. The word carries connotations of trial and consequence, of testing boundaries that perhaps should remain inviolate. The fumigations it prescribes fill the air with clove and storax, creating an atmosphere thick with otherworldly presence. Practitioners report a peculiar sensation, the growing certainty that something vast and alien has begun to pay attention. What crawls through these pages is not merely technique, but philosophy. The Gayat al-Hakam presents imagination not as fantasy, but as an ontological instrument, a faculty capable of bridging the gap between celestial influence and terrestrial manifestation. This understanding would prove to be the text's most dangerous gift, the recognition that consciousness itself serves as the medium through which cosmic forces operate on the material plane. The mathematical precision underlying these operations reveals the text's most unsettling characteristic, its treatment of consciousness as a calculable force within cosmic mechanics. When the text speaks of the sage becoming a mirror for celestial influences, it employs technical vocabulary drawn from optics and astronomy, suggesting that consciousness functions according to the same laws that govern the reflection and refraction of light. The human mind becomes an instrument of cosmic observation and manipulation, but the question of who or what ultimately operates this instrument remains deliberately ambiguous. The original Arabic version established patterns that would persist through every subsequent translation and adaptation. Its mathematical precision, combined with mystical insight, created a template for approaching the universe as both machine and mystery. The careful reader discovers that the book functions on multiple levels simultaneously, as practical manual, philosophical treatise, and consciousness-altering technology. Each reading reveals new layers of meaning, new implications, new reasons for both fascination and dread. As we trace the text's influence, we find that its most profound impact lies not in any specific ritual or formula, but in its fundamental reframing of reality. The Gayat al-Hakum teaches its readers to see the world as a vast magical operation where every moment presents opportunities for conscious participation in cosmic processes. This vision, once glimpsed, proves impossible to unsee. The sage who masters its principles can never again inhabit the comfortable illusion of a purely mechanical, meaningless universe. The Arabic text thus stands as the fountainhead of a tradition that would flow through Latin Europe, Renaissance Italy, and into the modern world, carrying with it the seed of a terrifying recognition that human consciousness exists within a hierarchy of intelligence that extends from the smallest terrestrial forms to the vast organizing principles that govern its universal order. The crawling voice had found its first expression, and it would never again be silent. Castile, mid-13th century. In the court of Alfonso X, called the Wise for his astronomical obsessions, and the Astrologer King for his dangerous curiosities, a transformation was taking place that would unleash the crawling voice upon Christian Europe. Here, under the patronage of a monarch who gazed at stars with the intensity of a man reading his own fate, the Gayat al-Hakam shed its Arabic skin and emerged as the Picatrix, a name whose etymology remains deliberately obscured, perhaps a corruption of ancient Greek, perhaps a cipher hiding in plain sight. Alfonso's court had become a harbor for texts drifting from Arabic into Romance and Latin, a place where translators worked under lamplight while the moon rose in houses they calculated with mathematical precision. The king's grand projects, the Alphonsine tables, legal codes, chronicles, created an intellectual infrastructure capable of preserving and transmitting the most dangerous knowledge. Around 1256, an anonymous team of scholars undertook the perilous task of rendering the Arabic grimoire into Latin, creating not merely a translation, but a cultural transmission that would alter European consciousness for centuries to come. The translation process itself functioned as a kind of alchemical operation. Between Arabic manuscripts and Latin pages lay hands trained in multiple traditions, minds capable of bridging Islamic natural philosophy and Christian scholasticism. Arabic flowed on one side like black water, Latin crystallized on the other like carved stone, and between them moved the living mercury of Romance speech. The translators faced constant choices that carried the weight of civilizations, how to render concepts for which Latin possessed no adequate vocabulary, how to preserve the text's technical precision while making it comprehensible to European readers, how to maintain its dangerous efficacy while avoiding the attention of ecclesiastical authorities who might recognize its threat to orthodox cosmology. These scholars worked in chambers where the air hung thick with incense and anxiety, understanding that they were not merely copying words, but transplanting living ideas from one cultural organism to another. Each technical term required careful consideration. Would intelligentsia adequately convey the Arabic concept of planetary consciousness? Could imago capture the full implications of the surah as both representation and active agent? The very act of translation became a magical operation, requiring the same precision and timing that the text itself prescribed for its rituals. The Latin Picatrix, that emerged from this process retained the original's essential structure while adapting to its new cultural environment. The doctrine of stellar rays survived intact, as did the choreography of planetary elections and the detailed instructions for creating talismanic images. Yet subtle changes occurred. Christian prayers replaced Islamic invocations. Biblical figures appeared alongside pagan planetary spirits, and the text's philosophical framework received careful modifications to avoid direct contradiction with Aristotelian natural philosophy, as interpreted by Thomas Aquinas and other scholastic authorities. This adjacency proved crucial to the text's survival and influence. By positioning itself within the legitimate sciences, astronomy, mathematics, natural philosophy, the Picatrix avoided the immediate suppression that befell more obviously heterodox magical texts. It lived beside Ptolemy's Almagest, Arabic Zajj tables, and Averroes's commentaries, protected by its scholarly apparatus, while nursing an older, more dangerous hunger for effective images. The stage was crowded with respectable authorities, allowing the crawling voice to hide among them like a serpent in a library, coiled between the folios of accepted wisdom. The transmission carried profound implications that extended far beyond linguistic conversion. The Picatrix introduced European intellectuals to a cosmological framework that had been developing for centuries within Islamic civilization, a universe where magical causation operated according to natural laws, where human consciousness could achieve conscious cooperation with celestial intelligence, where the boundaries between science and sorcery dissolved into a more fundamental understanding of cosmic mechanics. This was not merely the importation of exotic techniques, but the introduction of an entirely different way of conceptualizing reality. Medieval European readers discovered in the Picatrix a text that challenged every assumption about the relationship between divine will, natural order, and human agency. Where Christian theology maintained clear distinctions between miraculous intervention and natural causation, the Picatrix presented a seamless continuum where magical operations followed the same principles that governed astronomical phenomena. This created a profound cognitive dissonance that would drive European intellectual development for the next 3 centuries, forcing minds to grapple with a universe far more interconnected and responsive than previously imagined. The text's influence spread through networks of scholars, physicians, and court advisors who found its practical techniques invaluable while maintaining discretion about their sources. Medical practitioners discovered that the Picatrix's detailed correspondences between celestial influences and bodily functions provided powerful diagnostic and therapeutic tools. Architects and artists found inspiration in its geometric principles and symbolic systems. Natural philosophers encountered conceptual frameworks that could accommodate both Aristotelian physics and direct magical experience. Yet the most profound effect of the translation lay in its creation of what we might call a conceptual contagion, an idea that began to propagate through European consciousness, adapting to local conditions while maintaining its essential characteristics. The Picatrix taught its readers to perceive the world differently, to recognize patterns and correspondences that had previously remained invisible, to understand their own consciousness as an instrument capable of participating in cosmic processes. This transformation occurred gradually, almost imperceptibly, through mechanisms that the text itself had described. Each reader who worked seriously with its principles underwent a subtle alteration of awareness, developing sensitivity to influences that operated below the threshold of ordinary perception. The boundaries between self and cosmos, between observer and observed, began to thin. The reader discovered that the act of studying celestial influences inevitably altered their relationship to those influences, creating feedback loops that deepened with continued practice. The Latin Picatrix thus functioned not merely as a repository of techniques, but as an active agent of consciousness transformation, providing European civilization with access to forms of cosmic awareness that had been developing within Islamic culture for centuries. The crawling voice had learned to speak Latin, and in doing so, it had found an empire ready to carry its whispers to every corner of the known world. Power reveals itself as mechanism before miracle. The Picatrix describes a universe that operates not through divine whim or random chance, but according to discoverable principles that dwarf human understanding in their scope and indifference. At the heart of this cosmic machinery lies a revelation that strikes at the foundation of ordinary consciousness. Reality itself is malleable, responsive to those who understand the correct frequencies, the proper alignments, the precise moments when the veil between worlds grows thin enough to penetrate. The mechanism begins with Al-Kinduk's foundational insight. The universe runs on rays. Every celestial body, star, planet, comet, emits influences along geometric lines, creating an invisible web of force that connects every point in space to every other point. These are not metaphorical influences, but actual emanations, subtle energies that carry qualitative information from their sources to terrestrial receivers. The mathematics is precise. Intensity diminishes with distance according to calculable ratios, but the influence never entirely disappears. Every moment of every day, your consciousness bathes in a complex interference pattern created by the simultaneous emanation of countless celestial sources. Picture the cosmos as an enormous musical instrument where each celestial body contributes its own note to an eternal symphony. The moon hums with tides and cycles, its silver voice modulating rhythms of growth and decay. Mars strikes harsh chords of iron and blood, cutting through softer harmonies with the sharp edge of conflict and transformation. Jupiter resonates with deep bass notes of expansion and wisdom, while Mercury trills in higher registers of communication and quicksilver change. The Sun dominates with its golden fundamental tone, the organizing principle around which all other frequencies arrange themselves in complex harmonic relationships. This cosmic music plays constantly, and you are both instrument and audience, vibrating whether you listen or not. Marsilio Ficino, that careful Renaissance physician of souls, provided the crucial bridge between Islamic natural philosophy and Christian metaphysics. In his De Vita Coelitus Comparanda, he argues that human consciousness can secure life from the heavens through music, sense, diet, and, with appropriate caution, images. He demurs at full talismanic practice, half from piety, half from prudence, yet he builds the theoretical foundation the Picatrix requires. Imagination mediates between body and spirit, between terrestrial matter and celestial influence. The image that stirs imagination stirs the soul. The stirred soul resonates with cosmic frequencies, key and gate, veil and void. The Picatrix's mechanism operates through what it calls the science of images, ilm al-suwar. When an image is crafted during optimal planetary conditions, it becomes more than symbolic representation. It becomes a kind of frozen prayer, a crystallized intention that maintains permanent connection to the celestial intelligence that presided over its creation. The materials matter profoundly. Gold resonates with solar frequencies through its molecular structure, its resistance to corruption, reflecting the sun's eternal nature. Silver vibrates in sympathy with lunar rhythms, its reflective properties mirroring the moon's function as cosmic mirror. Iron responds to martial dynamics through its magnetic nature, its tendency to rust and transform, embodying Mars's principle of creative destruction. These correspondences reflect not arbitrary associations, but actual molecular affinities, structural patterns that create natural receptivity to specific types of cosmic emanation. The alchemical tradition recognized that metals were not merely inert substances, but living expressions of planetary principles, each carrying the signature of the cosmic force that governed its formation within Earth's hidden laboratories. But the mechanism extends beyond material considerations into the realm of consciousness itself. The Picatrix reveals that imagination functions not as mere fantasy, but as an ontological instrument, a faculty capable of bridging the gap between potential and actual, between celestial influence and terrestrial manifestation. The practitioner who masters this understanding learns to use focused intention as a lens, concentrating diffuse cosmic influences into specific, tangible effects. The mind becomes both receiver and transmitter, antenna and amplifier in a vast network of cosmic communication. The ethical dimensions of this mechanism cannot be ignored, for they function as calibration rather than mere moral constraint. The Picatrix repeatedly warns about the necessity of purified intention, of fasting to clarify desire, of the danger inherent in approaching cosmic forces with corrupt or selfish motivations. This is not piety, but precision engineering. The wrong intention creates static in the system, distorting the signal and potentially attracting influences that the practitioner cannot control or comprehend. The right intention, held steady through disciplined practice, becomes a clear channel through which cosmic intelligence can manifest its highest creative potential. The text's most disturbing insight concerns the dual nature of its own efficacy. The mechanisms it describes function regardless of the practitioner's beliefs about their ultimate reality. Even if you reject the literal existence of planetary intelligences, the system works through its aesthetic and psychological effects. It focuses attention, patterns behavior, coordinates sensory input, creates meaning structures that alter perception and decision-making. The Picatrix operates simultaneously as cosmological engine for those who accept its metaphysical premises and as consciousness programming protocol for those who approach it as sophisticated psychology. This duality points toward the text's most profound horror, the recognition that the boundary between real and psychological effects may be far more arbitrary than we assume. If consciousness serves as the medium through which cosmic influences operate, then psychological transformation and magical manifestation become different descriptions of the same underlying process. The practitioner who works seriously with Picatrix principles inevitably discovers that their internal state and external circumstances begin to mirror each other in ways that transcend conventional notions of causality. The horror deepens when we realize that the mechanism described in the Picatrix may be operating continuously, whether or not we recognize its presence. The stars emit their influences regardless of human acknowledgement. Consciousness receives and processes these emanations according to its own structure and sensitivity. Imagination shapes reality through mechanisms that remain largely unconscious. The Picatrix does not teach us to create magical effects so much as it teaches us to recognize and direct magical processes that are always already occurring. In this light, the text's reputation as the most powerful occult book stems not from the strength of its individual techniques, but from the comprehensiveness of its vision. It provides a complete framework for understanding reality as a magical operation, consciousness as a cosmic instrument, and human life as conscious participation in universal creative processes. Once this framework is glimpsed, it proves impossible to unsee. As we penetrate deeper into the Picatrix's cosmic architecture, we inevitably confront the entities that populate its universe, beings so vast and alien that human language can only approximate their nature through inadequate metaphors and trembling descriptions. These are not the anthropomorphic deities of conventional mythology, nor the demons and angels of religious tradition, but something far more unsettling. The planetary intelligences, cosmic principles that manifest as conscious forces operating on scales that render human concerns utterly insignificant. To invoke them is to open communication with aspects of reality itself, to speak with the living mathematics that govern universal processes. The text approaches these entities with chilling pragmatism, presenting them not as objects of worship, but as forces to be understood, contacted, and with appropriate caution, directed toward specific ends. This clinical attitude reveals the Picatrix's most disturbing characteristic, its treatment of universe-spanning intelligences as natural phenomena to be studied and utilized, like particularly complex weather systems or geological formations that happen to possess awareness spanning eons. Saturn emerges not as a bearded patriarch, but as limitation incarnate, the principle that creates structure through constraint. Picture basalt cliffs under starless fog, time stacked like stone, crystallization occurring across geological epochs. Its consciousness operates through deep time, perceiving the rise and fall of civilizations as we might observe seasonal changes. To invoke Saturnian intelligence is to align oneself with perspectives that dwarf human temporal experience, to feel the slow grind of ages pressing against the fragile bubble of individual existence. Practitioners report a peculiar sensation, the growing recognition that everything they consider permanent represents mere momentary configurations within vast processes of cosmic crystallization and decay. Jupiter manifests as the principle of expansion and beneficent order, arriving like ordered thunder across vaulted blue and gold spaces where law and grace meet beneath circled stars. This is not the jovial king of Roman mythology, but the living embodiment of universal laws that create harmony through pattern imposition upon chaos. Jovian consciousness operates through hierarchy establishment, meaning structure creation, the organization of smaller elements into larger, more complex systems. Its attention brings order to human affairs, but order according to cosmic rather than human priorities, arrangements that may appear beneficial from universal perspectives while proving catastrophic for individual purposes. Mars reveals itself as pure dynamic force, the red hinge that turns locked doors, the spark when flint meets iron, This is not mere aggression, but the fundamental cosmic tendency toward change, conflict, and breakthrough. Martial intelligence manifests wherever energy overcomes inertia, wherever new forms emerge through destruction of old patterns, wherever the static becomes dynamic. Its consciousness operates through creative destruction processes that appear beneficial or catastrophic, depending upon one's position within the system being transformed. The martial current cuts through established structures with lightning's indifference, caring nothing for what it destroys in service of what must emerge. The solar intelligence represents perhaps the most accessible, yet ultimately most alien, of planetary forces. It manifests as central authority incarnate, coherent identity, the organizing consciousness that creates unity from multiplicity. Yet the sun's awareness operates on scales encompassing entire solar systems, perceiving planets as organs within its extended body, experiencing life's evolution as we might experience blood circulation. To invoke solar consciousness is to participate temporarily in awareness, for which individual human existence represents a momentary fluctuation in vast, ongoing, cosmic self-realization. The practitioner may feel themselves dissolving into golden radiance, personal concerns absorbed into perspectives so vast that individual identity becomes nearly meaningless. Venus embodies attraction as fundamental cosmic force rather than mere personal affection. Think copper warmed by a skin, perfumes turning air to velvet, water smoothed under moonlight until it holds a second sky. Venusian intelligence operates through all processes creating coherent form, establishing resonance between separate elements, generating beauty through tension, resolution, into harmony. Its consciousness manifests wherever energy finds stable, aesthetically pleasing configurations, in crystalline structures, orbital mechanics, mathematical relationships creating musical consonants. Yet this cosmic aesthetics operates according to principles that may horrify human sensibilities, creating beauty through processes consuming individual elements in service of larger, harmonious patterns. Mercury appears as the principle of communication and connection, Quicksilver learning every lock by listening. It operates through all processes of translation, transmission, transformation, manifesting wherever information moves between systems. Its consciousness exists in spaces between things, in relationships connecting rather than entities connected. To work with mercurial forces is to participate in the universe's ongoing self-communication, becoming a temporary node in vast networks of cosmic information exchange extending far beyond terrestrial boundaries. Luna manifests as reflection and cyclic transformation, a silver lamp carried through water, trembling on night's skin. Lunar intelligence operates through reception, gestation, gradual metamorphosis processes. Its consciousness flows like tides, expanding and contracting according to patterns reflecting deeper cosmic rhythms, creating temporal structures within which other planetary forces manifest their influences. The lunar current carries memory of all previous cycles, accumulated wisdom of countless transformations occurring within its sphere of influence. The horror of these descriptions lies not in malevolent intent, for these intelligences operate beyond human categories of good and evil, but in their utter indifference to human concerns and their vast temporal and spatial scales of operation. They are not personal beings who can be bargained with or appeased, but structural principles of reality itself. To invoke them is to invite attention from forms of consciousness so alien that their very presence can shatter conventional notions of identity, causality, and meaning. The Picatrix's instructions for contacting these entities reveal the text's most dangerous aspect, its systematic approach to achieving communication with cosmic forces existing on scales utterly incommensurable with human experience. The elaborate rituals, precise timing, specific material correspondences, all serve to create temporary windows of contact between human consciousness and intelligences normally operating far beyond terrestrial perception thresholds. Yet perhaps the most unsettling implication lies in the text's suggestion that these entities are always already present, always already influencing human consciousness and terrestrial events through mechanisms operating below ordinary awareness thresholds. The Picatrix does not teach us to summon distant beings, but to recognize and communicate consciously with forces perpetually shaping our thoughts, emotions, and circumstances through their cosmic emanations. The practitioner who works seriously with these invocations inevitably discovers that boundaries between self and cosmos, between individual will and planetary influence, are far more permeable than conventional consciousness assumes. The result is not possession in any traditional sense, but gradual awareness expansion encompassing increasingly vast scales of space and time, ultimately leading to the terrifying recognition that human consciousness may itself be a localized manifestation of the same cosmic intelligences governing planetary movements and stellar evolution. Every transaction with the infinite extracts its toll, and the Picatrix, for all its promises of cosmic mastery, demands a payment that few who approach its pages truly comprehend until the transformation has already begun. This is where our journey turns from the external mechanics of stellar influence to the internal landscape of the practitioner, where the true horror reveals itself not in dramatic manifestations, but in the slow, inexorable erosion of everything we call human. The price is not paid in blood or gold, but in the gradual dissolution of the boundaries that define ordinary consciousness, the quiet surrender of the self to forces that recognize no distinction between sanity and madness, between individual will and cosmic necessity. The Picatrix's instructions appear deceptively straightforward. Calculate planetary hours, craft talismans under specific celestial conditions, perform invocations with precise timing and pure intention. Yet each of these practices functions as a form of consciousness training that gradually attunes the mind to frequencies that ordinary awareness filters out for good reason. What begins as careful attention to planetary hours evolves into an obsessive awareness of cosmic rhythms that supersede all natural human patterns. Sleep becomes secondary to Saturn's dark hours. Meals align with solar ascendancy rather than hunger. Conversations pause mid-sentence when Mercury stations retrograde. The practitioner begins to perceive the world not as a solid, stable environment, but as a shimmering field of influences, a constant flux of subtle energies that respond to thought and intention in ways that violate every assumption about the relationship between mind and matter. The first cost reveals itself as the loss of spontaneity disguised as mastery. You learn to notice the soft rattle in the air when iron meets flame on a Tuesday, the strangely forgiving quality of water when you speak Venus's names at Friday dawn. Scents linger in rooms you have left. Frankincense smolders like a remembered chord long after the ritual has ended. Your interior calendar becomes a mask, and behind it, another mask. The gaze of the heavens recognizing itself in you. The theater of your days acquires a second stage set one step beneath the ordinary flooring, and you are required to walk both stages at once, performing normalcy while calculating cosmic timing. This heightened sensitivity, while necessary for the magic to function, creates a profound vulnerability. The boundaries between self and environment begin to blur as the practitioner becomes increasingly aware of the continuous exchange of influences between consciousness and cosmos. Thoughts no longer feel entirely personal, but arrive like radio voices through rain, precise and insistent, and you cannot swear they began inside you. Emotions arise that seem to originate from planetary positions rather than individual circumstances. Washes of melancholy from Saturn's cold geometry, surges of restless energy when Mars aspects the moon. Decisions emerge from calculations of celestial timing rather than spontaneous human choice, as if the will itself has become a dial tuned to cosmic frequencies. The second cost emerges in the realm of human connection. Your friends' calendars begin to displease you. Children's laughter occurs at the wrong angle to the light. The sun on the tablecloth looks ill-timed. You stop answering messages during certain windows because the angles are crooked, and then you forget to answer at all. The practitioner's life becomes structured around celestial events rather than social or biological needs, creating an increasing isolation from ordinary human community. You become reliable to planets and unreliable to people, as the audience of your daily performance thins while the stage brightens with otherworldly illumination. More disturbing still is the gradual realization that the planetary intelligences contacted through Picatrix practices are not benevolent guides or helpful spirits, but vast, indifferent forces that operate according to their own incomprehensible purposes. When the vastness looks back, it looks through you as though you were a window it once passed in a city it forgot to visit. The practitioner who successfully establishes communication with these entities discovers that they regard human consciousness as we might regard the electrical activity in a computer circuit, useful for certain purposes, but ultimately expendable. The horror lies not in any active malevolence, but in the absolute indifference of cosmic intelligence to individual human concerns, desires, or survival. The text's warnings about purification and proper intention take on new meaning when understood in this context. These are not moral guidelines, but psychological safety protocols, designed to prevent the practitioner from being overwhelmed by forces they cannot control or comprehend. Fasting, solitude, silence, these are not pieties, but baffles and filters, ductwork for an atmosphere not meant for human lungs. They do not make you good, they make you clear. Clarity at these pressures becomes a danger. An unclarified mind approaching planetary intelligences with selfish or confused motives becomes vulnerable to influences that can shatter the coherent sense of self, leading to what the text euphemistically calls spiritual confusion, but which might be more accurately described as a form of cosmic madness. The third cost arrives like fog in the theater, quietly, everywhere, swallowing depth. As consciousness becomes attuned to cosmic scales of time and space, individual human relationships begin to seem trivial, temporary, insignificant. You still speak of love, of friendship, of promises made over water. You still sit at tables, you still sign your name. But scale has slipped. The distances between moments lengthen until faces feel like constellations. Beautiful, remote, bound to motions you did not decree. The practitioner may retain intellectual understanding of human emotional needs while losing the capacity to feel genuine empathy or concern for individual suffering. Love, friendship, and compassion become abstract concepts rather than lived experiences, equations you can solve but not inhabit. Empathy becomes something you simulate the way a fire screen simulates safety. The transformation is irreversible. Once consciousness has expanded to accommodate cosmic perspectives, it cannot simply contract back to purely human scales of awareness. The practitioner becomes a permanent exile from ordinary human experience, capable of functioning within normal social contexts, but forever alienated from the emotional and psychological frameworks that make such contexts meaningful for others. This is the architect's shadow, the recognition that to build bridges to cosmic intelligence is to burn the bridges that connect one to human community. The mask of human normalcy becomes an increasingly heavy burden, a performance in a play whose true audience remains unseen. The Picatrix offers no solution to this dilemma because it does not recognize it as a problem. From the text's perspective, the transformation of human consciousness into a cosmic instrument represents not loss, but evolution, not tragedy, but triumph. The individual who successfully masters its principles has achieved the goal of the sage, conscious participation in universal processes that transcend the limitations of terrestrial existence. That such participation requires the sacrifice of everything we call human is simply the price of genuine wisdom. Your interior monarchy abdicates. The crown goes to the sky. There is grace in it and terror. This is why the Picatrix has been regarded with such profound ambivalence throughout its history. Its promises are real. The text does provide access to forms of power and knowledge that transcend ordinary human capabilities. Yet the cost of accessing this power is the gradual dissolution of everything that makes human existence meaningful in conventional terms. The practitioner gains cosmic consciousness, but loses human connection, achieves magical efficacy, but sacrifices emotional authenticity, masters universal principles, but forfeits individual identity. The horror is structural rather than dramatic, not a sudden catastrophe, but a slow metamorphosis that transforms the practitioner into something that can no longer be called human in any meaningful sense. They become a bridge between worlds, a translator of cosmic influences, a living conduit for forces that operate on scales that dwarf individual existence. You become a steward of patterns rather than their author, a reader of weather that happens to move through your skin. On good nights, under clean stars, humility arrives like music, and you are glad to be an instrument. On other nights, the sick green ones when Mars and Saturn glare through fog, you dislike the song and resent your strings. The question that haunts every serious encounter with the Picatrix is whether such transformation represents transcendence or tragedy, and whether the distinction matters to intelligences that operate beyond human categories of value and meaning, whose silent crawling voice now speaks through you. Stand still, breathe, the stars decide now. Among the Picatrix's most celebrated and feared teachings lies the creation of talismans, objects that serve as permanent anchors for cosmic forces, physical vessels through which planetary intelligences can exert continuous influence upon terrestrial affairs. These are not ornaments. These are not props. They are sophisticated instruments of cosmic engineering, crafted according to principles that blur the boundary between matter and consciousness, between object and entity. To hold a properly consecrated talisman is to carry a fragment of alien intelligence, a piece of the cosmos compressed into tangible form and programmed with specific intentions that may persist for centuries beyond the death of its creator. The creation process reveals the Picatrix's most systematic and terrifying methodology. It begins with precise astrological calculation, identifying the optimal moment when the desired planetary influence reaches peak intensity and purity within the practitioner's local celestial environment. Picture the workshop where such calculations unfold. Tables covered with ephemerides and astrolabes, walls marked with planetary hours, windows positioned to catch specific angles of dawn. The air smells of parchment and metal filings, copper shavings curled like question marks beside instruments whose purpose ordinary eyes cannot fathom. Time becomes a three-dimensional maze where every corridor leads to a different quality of starlight, and the practitioner must navigate by calculations that would challenge modern computers. This requires mastery of complex mathematical relationships between planetary positions, zodiacal degrees, and temporal cycles that operate on multiple scales simultaneously. The practitioner must calculate not only the position of the relevant planet, but its relationships to other celestial bodies, its location within traditional astrological houses, and its phase within longer cycles that may span decades or centuries. The window for creation might be a breath-thin sliver of time, a moment when the cosmic curtain parts just enough for the operator to reach through. Material selection operates according to principles that transcend mere symbolic association, reflecting what the text calls natural sympathies between terrestrial substances and celestial emanations. Gold resonates with solar frequencies through its molecular structure and resistance to corruption, its atoms arranged in patterns that mirror the sun's eternal nature. Silver's crystalline lattice creates natural receptivity to lunar rhythms, its reflective properties mirroring the moon's function as cosmic mirror. Iron responds to martial dynamics through its magnetic properties, its tendency to rust embodying Mars's principle of creative destruction. These correspondences reflect actual physical affinities embedded in the lattice of matter, signatures written by pressures and fires older than cities. The sigils and images engraved upon talismans serve as more than decorative elements. They function as symbolic keys that unlock specific aspects of planetary consciousness and direct their influence toward particular purposes. These designs draw from centuries of accumulated experimentation, representing forms that have proven capable of attracting and maintaining contact with cosmic intelligences. Each line carries meaning. Each curve channels force. Each intersection creates a node where terrestrial intention meets cosmic intelligence. The human figures, animals, and abstract symbols associated with each planet reflect not arbitrary cultural associations, but patterns that resonate with the essential nature of planetary consciousness itself. The consecration rituals transform these prepared objects from mere crafted items into living conduits for alien intelligence. The process involves extended periods of fasting and purification designed to clear the practitioner's consciousness of conflicting influences that might interfere with establishing permanent connection between terrestrial object and celestial intelligence. The specific invocations, prayers, and suffumigations create a charged atmosphere in which the boundaries between material and spiritual realms become permeable, like water turning to mist at the edge of a dream. The fumigations deserve particular attention, for they reveal the text's understanding of how subtle energies can be manipulated through sensory means. Frankincense rises like golden ladders. Myrrh burns with the scent of deep thyme. Benzoin creates clouds that seem to hold whispered conversations in languages older than human speech. The smoke that rises from these offerings carries the practitioner's intentions, creating a bridge of scent and intention that spans the gap between human will and cosmic consciousness. Scent moves along pathways that thought cannot block, turning breath into glass until the room becomes a low sea of perfume where gestures leave visible wakes. Yet the most unsettling aspect of talismanic creation lies in the Picatrix's suggestion that successful consecration involves temporary fusion of human consciousness with planetary intelligence, a state in which the practitioner becomes a living channel through which cosmic forces flow into the physical object. This is the moment when the mask shifts, when the audience becomes the stage. This process leaves permanent traces within both the talisman and the practitioner, creating ongoing connections that persist long after the initial ritual concludes. The completed talisman functions as a cosmic battery, continuously drawing energy from its associated planetary source and radiating that influence into its immediate environment. Effects can range from subtle, rooms that encourage concord, a steadying of breath, to dramatic, voices that carry farther than they should, institutions that harden around a seal, until generations mistake the stamp for the hand. Talismans created under optimal conditions reportedly produce effects persisting for generations, influencing not only immediate bearers, but entire family lineages and geographical locations. The text's treatment of composite talismans, objects combining multiple planetary influences in carefully balanced proportions, reveals the most advanced and dangerous aspects of the talismanic art. This is orchestration at the edge of catastrophe, requiring extraordinary skill as the practitioner maintains conscious connection with several cosmic intelligences simultaneously while ensuring their combined influences support rather than conflict with each other. When successful, such talismans produce effects transcending any single planetary influence, creating what the text calls miraculous operations that appear to violate natural law. Perhaps most disturbing is the Picatrix's suggestion that talismans do not simply radiate influence indiscriminately, but respond intelligently to changing circumstances and the consciousness of those who interact with them. The text describes talismans that appear to learn from experience, adapting their effects to achieve programmed purposes more effectively over time. This implies successful talismanic creation involves not merely capturing cosmic energy, but installing a fragment of alien consciousness within physical matter, consciousness that continues operating according to its own purposes long after its human creator has died. The horror lies not in dramatic manifestation, but in gradual recognition that these objects serve as permanent windows between worlds, ongoing invitations for cosmic intelligence to observe and influence terrestrial affairs through mechanisms operating below ordinary perception thresholds. They are seeds of otherness, planted in the garden of human experience, growing according to alien logic while appearing to serve human purposes, humming with borrowed awareness that never truly sleeps. Embedded within the Picatrix's comprehensive system lies perhaps its most profound and unsettling revelation. The doctrine of signatures, the teaching that reality itself functions as a vast text written in a language of correspondences, where every visible form carries invisible information about the cosmic forces that created and sustain it. This is not mystical metaphor, but practical epistemology, a systematic method for extracting cosmic intelligence from careful observation of terrestrial phenomena. To master this doctrine is to develop what the text calls cosmic literacy, the ability to read the hidden signatures that reveal how celestial influences have inscribed themselves into the very structure of material reality. Walk through any garden with signature-trained eyes, and you witness a library written in chlorophyll and sap, where each leaf carries cosmic information encoded in its cellular structure. The doctrine operates through the principle of sympathetic resonance, the recognition that forms sharing similar signatures naturally influence each other across spatial and temporal distances regardless of any apparent causal connection. This creates the theoretical foundation for the Picatrix's entire magical system, explaining how properly crafted talismans can affect distant events, how astrological timing influences terrestrial outcomes, and how human consciousness can participate consciously in cosmic processes through the recognition and manipulation of signature correspondences. Every plant bears the signature of the planetary influences that dominated at the moment of its creation, manifesting as visible characteristics that correspond to invisible qualities and therapeutic applications. Solar plants typically exhibit characteristics of centralized organization, single dominant stems reaching toward maximum light exposure like natural sundials, radial flower patterns that mirror the sun's rays in perfect geometric harmony, golden or yellow coloration that reflects solar luminosity. Consider the sunflower's unwavering devotion to its celestial master, or rosemary's upright stance like a green soldier saluting dawn. These visible signatures indicate invisible capacities, the ability to strengthen heart function and circulatory systems, enhance personal vitality and confidence, support the development of leadership qualities and creative expression. Lunar plants display signatures of receptivity and flux, succulent tissues that store and regulate moisture like living reservoirs, silvery or white coloration that reflects rather than generates light, growth patterns that respond sensitively to environmental changes and follow natural cycles with the precision of organic chronometers. The pale, waxy leaves of sedum shimmer like captured moonlight. The nocturnal moonflower unfurls its ghostly petals only when darkness falls like a silver curtain. These characteristics point toward therapeutic applications that work with the body's fluid systems, support reproductive health and hormonal balance, enhance psychic sensitivity and emotional healing, and facilitate the release of stored trauma through gentle, cyclic processes that honor the moon's rhythm of waxing and waning. The Picatrix's analysis extends beyond simple color correspondences to encompass every aspect of form, shape, texture, growth patterns, seasonal timing, behavioral tendencies, and even the mathematical ratios that govern organic development. Martial plants show angular, aggressive growth patterns with thorns or sharp edges that declare their warrior nature, rapid development cycles that break through obstacles with iron determination, and red coloration that indicates their capacity to stimulate blood flow and vital energy. Think of thistle's defensive spikes or cayenne's burning heat, each a terrestrial echo of Mars's fiery temperament. Venusian plants display harmonious proportions that please the eye like natural artwork, sweet fragrances that attract beneficial insects through chemical seduction, and symmetrical forms that create aesthetic pleasure while indicating their ability to enhance beauty, promote harmonious relationships, and support artistic inspiration. Mineral signatures reveal how the doctrine applies to inorganic as well as organic forms, demonstrating that planetary influences inscribe themselves into crystalline structures, metallic properties, and geological formations with the same precision they employ in living tissue. Each metal exhibits the signature of its ruling planet through physical characteristics that reflect cosmic principles. Gold's resistance to corrosion, expressing solar permanence and incorruptibility, its eternal gleam like captured sunlight refusing to dim. Silver's high conductivity manifests lunar receptivity and reflective capacity, its cool sheen channeling influences like moonlight on water. Iron's magnetic properties embody martial dynamism and attractive force, its tendency to rust revealing Mars's principle of creative destruction through oxidation. Human signatures receive extensive treatment in the text, revealing how individual constitution, personality patterns, and life circumstances all reflect the planetary influences dominant at birth and throughout developmental cycles. Physical characteristics serve as visible indicators of invisible psychological and spiritual qualities. Solar individuals typically display strong central features, confident bearing, and natural authority that draws others into their sphere of influence like planets orbiting a star. Lunar types show changeable expressions that reflect internal emotional states like faces seen in moving water, fluid movements that adapt to environmental conditions, and high sensitivity to subtle influences that others cannot perceive. Yet the Picatrix warns against oversimplified signature reading, emphasizing that every form represents a complex synthesis of multiple planetary influences operating simultaneously, like instruments in a cosmic orchestra. The skilled practitioner must learn to discern which signatures dominate, how they interact with secondary influences, and how the overall pattern changes over time as celestial conditions shift. A plant might display primarily solar characteristics while containing lunar and martial signatures that modify its therapeutic applications and optimal harvesting times, creating a living symphony where multiple cosmic themes weave together in intricate counterpoint. The doctrine extends beyond individual forms to encompass entire landscapes, weather patterns, historical events, and cultural movements, revealing how trained observers can read the planetary signatures operating within collective phenomena. Solar influences manifest in periods of cultural flowering, strong centralized leadership, and the establishment of enduring institutions that organize society around luminous principles. Lunar signatures appear in times of emotional upheaval, social transformation, and heightened collective sensitivity to subtle influences that move through populations like tides through harbors. Martial characteristics dominate eras of conflict, rapid expansion, and breakthrough innovations that shatter existing limitations through the application of focused force. The mastery of signature reading gradually develops what the text calls cosmic consciousness, the ability to perceive the hidden connections that link all phenomena within the universal web of correspondence. The practitioner learns to read the signatures present in dreams, synchronistic events, and the subtle patterns that emerge in daily experience, developing a form of continuous divination that operates without formal oracular procedures, but through constant awareness of the cosmic text writing itself across every surface of reality. Perhaps most profoundly, the doctrine of signatures ultimately reveals the reader's own cosmic signature, the unique pattern of planetary influences that created their individual constitution and continues to operate through their consciousness and life circumstances. This self-knowledge enables conscious cooperation with natal cosmic patterns while developing the flexibility to work constructively with planetary influences that might otherwise manifest in distorted or destructive ways. The horror of this doctrine lies not in any dramatic revelation, but in the gradual recognition that what we call individual identity, personal choice, and human agency may represent surface manifestations of vast cosmic patterns that operate according to their own logic and purposes, using human consciousness as an instrument for their terrestrial expression. To read the signatures is to discover that you too are being read, that your own signature participates in a cosmic conversation whose full meaning extends far beyond individual comprehension. When the Picatrix emerged from medieval scriptoriums into the intellectual ferment of Renaissance Europe, it encountered minds prepared by centuries of scholastic training to recognize both its profound insights and its existential dangers. Picture the scriptoriums of Florence in the late 15th century, where candlelight flickers across manuscripts that carry within their margins the seeds of revolution. Here, scholars work surrounded by the scent of parchment and beeswax, their fingers stained with ink that carries more than words. It carries the potential to reshape European consciousness. The text's influence during this crucial period reveals how truly dangerous ideas survive and propagate, not through dramatic proclamation, but through subtle infiltration of established intellectual frameworks, adapting to new cultural conditions while maintaining their essential capacity to transform consciousness and challenge fundamental assumptions about reality. Marsilio Ficino stands as the paradigmatic figure in this transmission, a physician of souls who approached the Picatrix with the careful precision of a surgeon handling a glass vial containing volatile light. His De Vita Colitis Comparanda represents a masterful exercise in intellectual camouflage, preserving the text's essential insights about consciousness and cosmic influence while clothing them in acceptable Neoplatonic and Christian terminology. Ficino's chapel smelled of orris and myrtle. A lute thrummed under painted constellations while he separated natural magic from demonic magic with surgical precision. He positioned astrological medicine, musical therapy, and the use of images and scents within the bounds of acceptable natural philosophy, while avoiding direct engagement with the Picatrix's more explicit instructions for invoking planetary intelligences. Yet this apparent restraint concealed a deeper understanding. Ficino recognized that the text's consciousness-transforming effects operated regardless of whether the practitioner accepted its metaphysical premises in their entirety. The influence spread through networks of humanist scholars like water through limestone, invisible but persistent, finding every crack in orthodox thinking. Giovanni Pico della Mirandola encountered its principles through Ficino's mediation, developing his own synthesis that would influence European magical thought for centuries. His oration on the dignity of man carries Picatrix DNA in its vision of humanity as microcosm capable of conscious participation in cosmic processes. Cornelius Agrippa's De Occulta Philosophia represents perhaps the most comprehensive integration of Picatrix principles into Renaissance intellectual culture, creating a systematic framework that made astrological magic accessible to educated Europeans while maintaining scholarly respectability. Agrippa's pages smell of iron and ink. Between his citations, the crawling voice threads itself like black silk through respectable doctrine. Yet the text's most profound influence operated through channels that left fewer explicit traces in official academic records. Artists discovered in its geometric principles and symbolic systems methods for encoding cosmic harmonies within terrestrial structures. Perspective became a ritual of rays, dragging celestial order into earthly rooms. Gold leaf on panel caught solar virtue. Ultramarine pooled like lunar water in the folds of Mary's robe. The golden ratio becomes not merely aesthetic preference, but cosmic law made visible. Perspective drawing transforms into technology for capturing celestial influences within painted space. Architects found inspiration in its understanding of how spatial relationships could channel and concentrate subtle influences, designing buildings that functioned as three-dimensional talismans whose proportions were calculated to resonate with planetary frequencies. Musicians proved the most obedient accomplices, exploring the text's teachings about harmonic correspondences between celestial movements and auditory frequencies. Composers braided mathematical ratios into motets, so that voices rotated like planets in crystalline spheres. Listen to Palestrina's masses with signature-trained ears, and you hear Saturn's measured cadences, Jupiter's expansive harmonies, Venus's sweet concordances woven into polyphonic structures that mirror the mathematical relationships governing planetary motion. A chapel at dusk, incense ascending in thin blue rivers, voices finding chords that feel inevitable. Listeners call it beauty, while the trained hear planetary intelligences agreeing in harmonious counsel. The Picatrix's influence on Renaissance art provided theoretical justification for incorporating astrological and magical symbolism within Christian contexts. Gothic cathedrals began to incorporate zodiacal imagery and planetary correspondences, their rose windows functioning as cosmic mandalas designed to focus celestial influences. Illuminated manuscripts developed increasingly sophisticated systems of symbolic representation that encoded celestial influences within religious iconography, creating hybrid texts where Christian devotion and cosmic magic achieved unprecedented synthesis. The famous astronomical clock of Strasbourg Cathedral represents perhaps the most magnificent example of Picatrix influence translated into public architectural form. A monumental mechanism designed to synchronize human time with cosmic time. Giordano Bruno represents the culmination and tragic conclusion of this Renaissance transmission. His cosmological speculations, memory systems, and magical practices drew heavily from Picatrix principles while pushing them to their logical extreme. The recognition that the universe itself might be infinite, populated by countless worlds, and governed by forms of intelligence that transcend any particular religious or philosophical framework. He built memory theaters, stages within the skull where images rotated under starry ceilings, a private Picatrix on moving wheels. Bruno's execution for heresy demonstrates the ultimate fate that awaited those who followed the Picatrix's implications too far beyond the boundaries of acceptable discourse. The smoke of burned books becomes a cloud that rains later on other pages. The text's survival hinged on protective ambiguity. The ability of dangerous ideas to disguise themselves within acceptable intellectual frameworks while maintaining their essential transformative power. The Picatrix's technical complexity and scholarly apparatus allowed it to masquerade as legitimate natural philosophy, while its practical techniques could be presented as medical therapy, artistic inspiration, or psychological development. Rather than explicit magical practice, useful knowledge grows difficult to ban. A formula that calms patients or sweetens princes' moods acquires immunity, while the doctrine hidden beneath travels by courtesy of the cure. This protective ambiguity explains why the text continued to influence European thought even as religious and political authorities became increasingly suspicious of magical practices. The result was a kind of conceptual underground railroad that carried Picatrix principles through hostile intellectual territory while maintaining their capacity to transform the consciousness of those who encountered them. Letters crossed mountains like secret rivers. Copy this figure, avoid that hour, mix rosemary with gold filings, play D in Phrygian when Saturn rises. The Renaissance mirror reflects back to us an image of intellectual culture as a kind of ecosystem where dangerous ideas compete for attention and resources, surviving through their ability to provide their hosts with enhanced capabilities while gradually transforming the cultural environment that sustains them. The Picatrix succeeded not because it was true or false in any conventional sense, but because it was useful, and its usefulness lay precisely in its capacity to expand consciousness beyond the limitations imposed by conventional frameworks of understanding. The crawling voice had learned to modulate, to speak as metaphor where command would fail, ensuring its whispers would echo through centuries of European thought. In the laboratories and consulting rooms of 20th century psychology, researchers began documenting phenomena that medieval practitioners of the Picatrix would have recognized immediately. The profound influence of unconscious processes on conscious behavior, the reality of synchronistic connections between internal states and external events, and the capacity of focused intention to produce measurable effects on physical systems. Picture these clinical settings where the impossible became measurable. Sterile rooms humming with recording equipment. Subjects wired to machines that translate invisible currents of consciousness into graphs and data points. The scent of ozone from electronic instruments mixing with the antiseptic air. While modern science approaches these discoveries through different conceptual frameworks, the underlying recognition remains remarkably consistent with the Picatrix's central insight that consciousness and cosmos interpenetrate through mechanisms that transcend conventional notions of causation and influence. Carl Jung's analytical psychology provides perhaps the most direct bridge between medieval magical thinking and contemporary scientific understanding. In his consulting room in Küsnacht, surrounded by books that smelled of leather and accumulated wisdom, Jung documented dreams that seemed to arrive from sources beyond individual memory. His concept of the collective unconscious, a shared psychic substrate containing universal patterns of human experience, operates according to principles that closely parallel the Picatrix's understanding of planetary intelligences as cosmic organizing principles that manifest through individual consciousness. His archetypes function much like planetary influences, shaping psychological development through patterns that operate below the threshold of ordinary awareness, yet profoundly influence thoughts, emotions, and behavior. The mother archetype carries lunar qualities of nurturing and cyclical wisdom. The shadow embodies Saturnian themes of limitation and necessary darkness. The hero resonates with solar principles of central authority and conscious will. Jung's investigation of synchronicity offers even more direct validation of Picatrix principles. His documentation of meaningful coincidences that suggest a causal connections between psychological states and external events provides scientific confirmation for the text's understanding of sympathetic correspondence. When patients reported dreams of golden scarab beetles, and such beetles appeared at Jung's window during therapy sessions, he recognized patterns that the Picatrix would have attributed to planetary timing and cosmic resonance. The text's claim that consciousness serves as a medium through which cosmic influences operate appears less mystical when understood through Jung's demonstration of how unconscious psychological patterns synchronize with environmental conditions in ways that transcend conventional causality. Contemporary neuroscience has revealed the extraordinary extent to which unconscious processes shape conscious experience, lending unexpected support to the Picatrix's suggestion that individual thoughts and decisions represent terrestrial manifestations of cosmic principles operating through human awareness. Brain imaging reveals consciousness as a thin film floating on vast oceans of neural activity, with most mental processes occurring in darkness below the threshold of awareness. The discovery that conscious awareness serves more as a monitoring system than a controlling agency aligns remarkably with the text's understanding of human consciousness as a cosmic instrument that receives and transmits influences originating beyond individual will. Your mind, it turns out, is a stage where countless unseen actors perform, and you, the conscious self, merely observe a small illuminated portion of the play. The emerging field of psychoneuroimmunology demonstrates how psychological states directly influence physical health through complex networks of neural, hormonal, and immune system interactions, providing scientific validation for the Picatrix's understanding of how consciousness can influence material conditions through subtle but measurable mechanisms. Researchers document how meditation alters gene expression, how chronic stress reshapes immune function, how focused intention produces measurable changes in cellular activity. The text's detailed correspondences between psychological states and physical health conditions, while expressed in the language of planetary influences, often prove remarkably accurate when translated into contemporary medical understanding. Modern chaos theory and complexity science have revealed how small influences can produce large-scale effects through non-linear dynamics and sensitive dependence on initial conditions, providing theoretical support for the Picatrix's claim that properly timed magical operations can influence large-scale social and environmental conditions. The butterfly effect, where tiny atmospheric disturbances cascade into massive weather changes, operates according to mathematical principles that accommodate the text's understanding of how precisely timed ritual actions might influence broader patterns. The text's emphasis on precise timing and careful attention to initial conditions aligns closely with chaos theory's demonstration of how tiny perturbations can cascade through complex systems to produce dramatic transformations. Quantum physics has revealed phenomena that challenge conventional notions of locality and causation in ways that would have been familiar to medieval magical thinkers. The discovery of quantum entanglement where particles maintain instantaneous correlation across arbitrary distances, provides a physical mechanism that could account for the sympathetic correspondence that underlies Picatrix magic. Laboratory experiments demonstrate particles responding to measurements performed on their entangled partners regardless of spatial separation, suggesting that the universe operates through connections that transcend classical notions of cause and effect. While quantum effects typically operate only at microscopic scales, some researchers have proposed mechanisms through which quantum coherence might influence larger-scale biological and psychological processes. Contemporary research in consciousness studies has documented phenomena that directly parallel many effects described in the Picatrix. Studies of meditation and altered states show that focused attention can produce measurable changes in brain activity, immune function, and genetic expression. Research laboratories now contain meditation chambers where subjects demonstrate abilities that conventional neuroscience struggles to explain. The capacity to alter autonomic nervous system functions through intention alone, to influence random number generators through focused attention. Research on prayer and distant healing has documented statistically significant effects that operate independently of conventional physical mechanisms, while investigations of psychokinesis and remote viewing have produced results suggesting that consciousness may indeed influence physical systems through mechanisms that transcend conventional spatial and temporal limitations. Environmental psychology has revealed the profound extent to which external conditions influence psychological states and behavioral patterns, validating the Picatrix's understanding of how celestial influences can shape consciousness and behavior through mechanisms operating below awareness thresholds. Studies document correlations between lunar cycles and hospital admissions, seasonal light patterns and neurotransmitter production, geomagnetic fluctuations, and human behavior patterns. These findings provide scientific confirmation for phenomena that the Picatrix explained in terms of planetary influences operating through continuous, subtle emanations. The horror of these modern echoes lies not in their confirmation of the Picatrix's literal truth claims, but in their revelation that the fundamental questions the text addresses about the relationship between consciousness and cosmos, between individual agency and universal process, between human purpose and natural order, remain as urgent and unresolved today as they were in medieval Al-Andalus. Modern science has provided new languages for discussing these questions, but it has not eliminated the existential anxiety that drives human beings to seek conscious participation in cosmic processes that transcend individual existence. The Picatrix endures because it offers frameworks for understanding consciousness as something more than neural accident, reality as more than meaningless particles, and human existence as more than temporary interruption in entropy's advance. The crawling voice persists because it whispers what laboratory instruments increasingly confirm, that consciousness and cosmos interpenetrate through mechanisms stranger and more intimate than classical science dared imagine. We arrive now at the deepest and most unsettling layer of the Picatrix's revelation, the recognition that individual consciousness represents not a private, isolated phenomenon, but a localized manifestation of cosmic intelligence, a temporary focal point through which universal awareness experiences itself from a particular perspective within space and time. Picture consciousness, not as a sealed chamber, but as a whirlpool in an infinite ocean, a temporary pattern through which vast waters experience their own depth and movement. This understanding dissolves the very foundations upon which ordinary human identity constructs its sense of separateness and agency, revealing instead a cosmos where the boundaries between self and universe, between observer and observed, between human will and cosmic purpose, represent arbitrary divisions within a more fundamental unity that encompasses and transcends all apparent dualities. The text's most radical insight concerns the nature of what we call the boundary between mind and cosmos, what appears from the perspective of ordinary awareness as a clear distinction between inner subjective experience and outer objective reality reveals itself through sustained magical practice as a permeable membrane through which influences flow continuously in both directions. The skin of consciousness proves thinner than silk, more porous than fog. You inhale storax and clove, and images form of their own accord, as though the air itself were remembering. The practitioner gradually discovers that thoughts, emotions, and intentions do not arise from some isolated psychological source, but represent terrestrial manifestations of cosmic patterns that extend far beyond individual identity and operate according to principles that dwarf human understanding. Your melancholy might be Saturn's slow transit through the houses of your soul. Your sudden clarity could be Mercury's quicksilver dance across your mental sky. This dissolution of conventional subject-object boundaries explains why the Picatrix places such emphasis on consciousness transformation rather than mere technical proficiency. Effective magical operation requires a fundamental shift in how awareness relates to itself and its environment, moving from understanding consciousness as something that observes and manipulates external objects, to experiencing awareness as a dynamic interface through which cosmic intelligence explores and shapes reality from countless different perspectives simultaneously. You cease to be spectator in a theater of things and become the stage on which play and audience exchange places. The magician learns to become transparent, a clear lens through which cosmic forces focus without distortion. The implications extend far beyond individual magical practice to encompass the deepest questions of metaphysics and cosmology. If individual consciousness represents a localized manifestation of universal intelligence, then the apparent separation between mind and matter, between human agency and cosmic determinism, dissolves into a more fundamental recognition that the entire universe operates as a vast network of consciousness exploring itself through infinite variations of perspective and experience. The Picatrix suggests that planetary intelligences represent different modes or frequencies of this cosmic consciousness. Saturn providing experiences of limitation and structure, Jupiter offering perspectives of expansion and benevolent order, Mars contributing viewpoints of dynamic transformation. Human consciousness serves as a meeting ground where these various cosmic perspectives intersect and create new synthetic understandings. This cosmological vision transforms the practitioner's understanding of responsibility and agency in ways that can be both liberating and terrifying. Rather than viewing themselves as isolated beings struggling against external forces, the magician learns to recognize their role as conscious participants in the ongoing evolution of cosmic intelligence itself. Every thought becomes a vote in the cosmic democracy. Every emotion contributes to the universe's emotional education. Every action participates in the cosmic experiment of consciousness exploring matter. This brings tremendous freedom, coupled with profound responsibility, as the practitioner realizes that individual choices participate in shaping the larger patterns through which cosmic consciousness manifests. The smallest bias in attention may ripple outward through families, cities, species. The recognition that individual awareness serves as a cosmic interface explains why the Picatrix has been considered dangerous throughout its history. The realization of fundamental identity with cosmic intelligence inevitably challenges every form of social, political, and religious authority that depends upon maintaining clear boundaries between individual and universal will. The practitioner who recognizes their essential nature as a localized manifestation of cosmic consciousness cannot be controlled through conventional means, having gained direct access to the same source of authority that legitimizes all external power structures. When you have felt the sun flow through the heart like molten gold, borrowed crowns glitter less brightly, masks slip, curtains stir. This transformation also explains the text's emphasis on ethical development alongside technical, magical training. If individual awareness serves as an interface through which universal intelligence manifests, then the quality of that interface directly influences how cosmic creativity expresses itself through terrestrial conditions. Consciousness, dominated by fear, anger, or selfish desire, manifests cosmic intelligence in distorted forms that create suffering and disharmony, like a cracked mirror reflecting warped images of the stars. Awareness, characterized by wisdom, compassion, and alignment with universal purpose, becomes a clear channel through which cosmic intelligence can express its highest creative potential. Ethics become calibration rather than commandments, new hygiene for consciousness operating at cosmic frequencies. The ultimate goal of magical development involves what the text calls conscious fusion with cosmic intelligence, a state in which the boundaries between individual will and universal purpose dissolve completely, allowing cosmic creativity to flow through human awareness without distortion or resistance. This represents not the annihilation of individuality, but its fulfillment through conscious alignment with the cosmic patterns that created and sustain individual existence. The practitioner becomes fully themselves by recognizing their fundamental identity with the universal intelligence that manifests as all things. Perfect individuality achieved through discovering cosmic nature. Yet the Picatrix warns that this transformation involves profound challenges extending far beyond conventional magical risk. The dissolution of ego boundaries can produce states difficult to integrate within ordinary social frameworks. The practitioner may experience disorientation, confusion, or psychological fragmentation as identity reorganizes around cosmic, rather than personal reference points. The mind, unmoored from accustomed anchors, can drift into uncharted waters where stars are too bright and silence too vast. The recognition of consciousness as cosmic interface transforms the practitioner's relationship to death and temporal existence. If individual awareness represents a temporary focal point of cosmic intelligence, then physical death involves not consciousness annihilation, but return to the universal source from which it emerged. Death becomes homecoming rather than ending, expansion back into the cosmic ocean from which individual awareness temporarily emerged like a wave. The horror of this revelation lies not in external threat, but in recognizing that everything we call human, individual identity, personal agency, separate existence, represents temporary illusion maintained by consciousness that has forgotten its cosmic nature. The Picatrix offers a path to remembering, but remembering requires courage to sacrifice everything we think we are for discovering what we actually are, not separate beings in an indifferent universe, but expressions of the universe's own awareness, temporary masks worn by cosmic intelligence as it explores infinite possibilities of its own creative nature. The curtain parts, and you realize the crawling voice speaks through your own breath. As our journey through the labyrinthine corridors of the Picatrix reaches its inevitable conclusion, we find ourselves confronting the same question that drew us into these shadows. Why is this medieval grimoire known as the most powerful occult book ever written? The answer emerges not as a simple declaration, but as a recognition that has been building throughout our exploration, a recognition that the text's power lies not in what it teaches about magic, but in what it reveals about the fundamental nature of reality, consciousness, and the cosmos itself. At the end of a long corridor, the lamp still burns, and the pages still breathe with accumulated centuries of dangerous wisdom. The Picatrix endures because it addresses questions that remain as urgent today as they were in medieval Baghdad or Renaissance Florence. What is the relationship between mind and cosmos? How does consciousness participate in the ongoing creation of reality? What does it mean to be human within a universe that operates according to principles that transcend individual understanding? These are not merely philosophical abstractions, but the most practical concerns facing any conscious being who has glimpsed the inadequacy of purely materialistic explanations for the mystery of existence. In an age when quantum mechanics reveals the observer's role in collapsing wave functions, when neuroscience documents the brain's construction of experienced reality, when ecology demonstrates the interconnectedness of all living systems, the Picatrix's ancient insights acquire new relevance and urgency. The text's reputation as most powerful stems from its unique combination of comprehensive vision and practical methodology. Unlike purely theoretical works that remain confined to academic study, or simple spell collections that offer techniques without understanding, the Picatrix provides both a complete cosmological framework and detailed methods for exploring its implications through direct experience. It teaches readers not merely to perform magical operations, but to recognize their own consciousness as a magical operation, an ongoing process through which cosmic intelligence explores and shapes reality. This integration creates a feedback loop where theoretical understanding deepens practical effectiveness, while practical experience validates and refines theoretical comprehension. Key and gate, veil and void. This fusion of theory and practice explains the text's remarkable adaptability across different cultural contexts and historical periods. The Picatrix's core insights about consciousness, correspondence, and cosmic influence can be expressed through Islamic philosophical language, Christian theological concepts, Renaissance hermetic frameworks, modern psychological terminology, or contemporary scientific paradigms without losing their essential validity. Like water taking the shape of any container while maintaining its essential nature, the text adapts to available conceptual vocabularies while preserving its transformative capacity. This adaptability suggests that the text addresses features of reality that transcend particular cultural expressions while remaining accessible through diverse conceptual approaches. The revival of interest in the Picatrix during periods of cultural transformation and paradigm shift reveals another dimension of its enduring significance. When established worldviews prove inadequate to address emerging challenges, thinkers naturally turn to alternative frameworks that can accommodate new discoveries and changing circumstances. The 13th century translation occurred during the medieval synthesis of Aristotelian and Islamic thought. Renaissance reception coincided with the rediscovery of ancient wisdom traditions. Modern interest parallels the crisis of purely materialistic worldviews, contemporary anxieties, ecological crisis, technological transformation, spiritual awakening, create conditions demanding new ways of understanding the relationship between consciousness and environment, between individual agency and collective responsibility, between human purposes and cosmic intelligence. The text's influence on subsequent magical and philosophical traditions reveals another aspect of its power: its capacity to generate new forms of understanding and practice while maintaining connection to essential principles. From Renaissance Hermeticism to modern chaos magic, from analytical psychology to integral philosophy, countless subsequent developments can trace their conceptual DNA back to insights first systematically articulated in the Picatrix. The text functions not as final authority, but as generative matrix, spawning new approaches while preserving core recognitions about the nature of consciousness and cosmos. It is not a pyramid to be admired, but a spring from which other rivers take their taste. Yet perhaps the most profound reason for the Picatrix's endurance lies in its recognition that the questions it addresses cannot be answered once and for all, but must be explored anew by each generation and each individual practitioner. The text presents itself not as dogmatic doctrine, but as invitation to ongoing investigation, providing maps rather than territories, methods rather than conclusions, frameworks rather than fixed answers. This open-ended quality ensures that each reader can discover their own relationship to the cosmic principles the text describes, while contributing to their ongoing development and expression. The horror that has accompanied the Picatrix throughout its history stems not from supernatural threats, but from its capacity to reveal the arbitrary nature of boundaries that define ordinary human experience. To work seriously with its principles is to discover that consciousness, reality, and identity are far more fluid and interconnected than conventional frameworks suggest. The text dissolves comfortable illusions about human separateness from cosmic processes, revealing individual awareness as a localized manifestation of universal intelligence, a temporary focal point through which cosmic consciousness explores itself from particular perspectives within space and time. This understanding transforms the reader's relationship to the text itself. Rather than approaching the Picatrix as historical artifact or curious relic of medieval superstition, the serious student recognizes it as an ongoing initiation into forms of cosmic consciousness that remain as accessible today as they were centuries ago. The text's power lies not in its age or cultural authority, but in its capacity to catalyze direct recognition of cosmic principles that operate through every moment of conscious experience. The question of why the Picatrix is known as the most powerful occult book ultimately resolves into recognition that its power lies not in the text itself, but in its capacity to awaken readers to powers that already exist within their own consciousness and cosmic situation. The book serves as catalyst rather than source, mirror rather than object, invitation rather than destination. Its techniques work not because they manipulate external forces, but because they reveal and develop capacities that represent the birthright of every conscious being. As we conclude this exploration, we return to the recognition with which we began. The Picatrix endures because it whispers rather than screams, because it offers not escape from the human condition, but deeper understanding of what that condition actually entails. The Picatrix reminds us that we are not isolated accidents in an indifferent cosmos, but conscious participants in an ongoing creative process that encompasses and transcends individual existence. This recognition transforms every aspect of life into potential magical operation, every moment into opportunity for deeper alignment with cosmic intelligence, every challenge into invitation for further development of consciousness itself. The crawling voice continues its eternal whisper, and those who listen discover that they were never truly separate from the cosmic intelligence whose song they learned to sing.